The man curiously got out of the car, and the road ahead was shrouded in black fog. Unexpectedly, in just a few days, the entire town was engulfed by the eerie black fog, and the residents vanished without a trace. Even more despairing is that terrifying monsters are hidden in the thick fog. What exactly is going on? It all started with a car accident. Ellie was reviewing her training notes when her notebook accidentally fell. Before she could bend down, the man in the backseat picked it up first. His name is Jason, a professional photographer who sometimes creates comics. Seeing that Ellie was single, Jason casually sat in the adjacent seat and quickly sketched a portrait of her with his pen. Looking at the lively features on the drawing paper, Ellie couldn't hide her inner excitement. Just as she was about to engage further with Jason, the bus was suddenly hit violently. When she opened her eyes again, Ellie was already lying in her own bed. Could it be that the car accident was just a nightmare? But when she glanced at the alarm clock on the table, she realized she was going to be late. Rushing into the bathroom to wash up, she inadvertently noticed that her underarm hair had become unusually thick. Although the sight was strange, she didn't have time to think about it, quickly got dressed, and hurried to work. Ellie is a nurse, but as soon as she stepped into the hospital lobby, she froze in place. The corridors that were usually crowded with patients and bustling with nurses were now completely empty. The smell of disinfectant mixed with deathly silence. Her shouts echoed in the empty corridor. Ellie frantically ran through all the departments, but only saw empty workstations, as if everyone had suddenly disappeared. Ellie felt a chill down her spine and hurriedly rushed out of the hospital doors, only to be met with an even more horrifying scene. The entire town was eerily quiet, with shop doors wide open and cars on the roadside still with their taillights on. Yet there wasn't a single person inside, only the sound of wind rustling the fallen leaves. Ellie's palms were sweating coldly, unable to accept such a bizarre scene. She went door to door, frantically ringing doorbells and banging on windows, but the only response was silence. Could it be that the entire town evacuated overnight? Ellie hurriedly drove back to her residence and locked all the doors and windows. Until midnight, she suddenly heard loud music. Going out to take a look, she found the house opposite was lit up, and someone seemed to be playing music inside. Ellie, as if grabbing a lifeline, walked forward anxiously. However, after pushing open the door, it was empty inside. Just as she was looking around in confusion, a man suddenly appeared. Ellie was startled, but was quickly replaced by joy. She finally met a living person, and it was Jason, the cartoonist who was sitting in the backseat during the car accident. His experience was exactly the same as Ellie's. After waking up, he found the town's residents had disappeared. The two didn't have time to chat and immediately rushed to the police station for help. But the police station's door was ajar, and it was also empty inside. The coffee on the desk was still warm, and the radio only emitted static noise. Jason tried for a long time, but couldn't receive any messages. He speculated that someone was maliciously jamming the signal, grabbed a handgun from the drawer, and decided to go into town for help. But just as they were about to leave the town, they were stunned by the scene before them. The end of the road was completely blocked by a thick black fog, rolling continuously like a living creature. Jason, suppressing his anxiety, reached his hand into the fog, but nothing unusual happened. However, he dared not venture deeper into the fog. They had no choice but to turn around and take another road out of town. After circling around, they found that all exits were covered by the black fog, making the entire town seem like an isolated island, surrounded by an ocean. Ellie suspected that the residents' disappearance might be related to the black fog, but she couldn't figure out the connection. As the sky gradually darkened, the two, hungry and scared, ducked into a burger joint to find something to eat. But the moment they pushed open the glass door, a sudden burst of noise erupted. The place was packed, with customers raising their glasses and laughing. Ellie excitedly rushed forward to greet them, but no matter how they called out, these people remained completely unaware. Jason, not believing it, ran to the street, encountering the exact same situation. Ellie stood frozen in the store, her gaze drawn to a corner table. Sitting there was her aunt who had passed away over 10 years ago, and across from her was a little girl with pigtails, her 10-year-old self. Ellie trembled as she reached out, wanting to touch her aunt's cheek, but the scene before her suddenly vanished, and the burger shop returned to its empty state, leaving only dust on the tables and cold chairs. Jason felt a chill in his heart. Could it be that he had been sent to a parallel universe? He recalled waking up in his home studio after the car accident, with a beard that had grown long, as if it hadn't been shaved for dozens of days. Ellie remembered her unusually thick armpit hair, and nodded, indicating she had experienced similar strange changes. To uncover the truth, Jason and Ellie returned to the edge of the black fog. This time, he specifically brought a tape measure and found that the black fog was moving at a speed of 0.8 miles per hour. According to this base, in 64 hours the black fog will reach the town center, and by then the entire town will be engulfed by it. Since they are unable to stop the advance of the black fog, they can only find a way to escape the town. But there is no subway here, and a few roads are also shrouded in the black fog. Suddenly, Ellie had a bright idea, and thought of the key to uncovering the truth. The next moment, the two of them arrived at the hospital security room. Although the surveillance was broken, the recording from the operating room was still there, playing a conversation between two doctors. They seemed to be discussing a patient with a brain injury whose chances of survival were very slim. At the end of the conversation, they actually mentioned the name Ellie. The two exchanged a terrified glance and immediately rushed into the patient's emergency room. There was no one on the hospital bed, but the monitor showed a pulse rate of 120 beats per minute. Jason asked Ellie to sit down and take a deep breath. Before long, the numbers on the monitor began to slowly decrease until they returned to the normal range. Jason vaguely guessed the truth and ran to the next room, where there was also a monitoring device, and the date on the card was actually 2 months after the car accident. Jason suddenly had a bold idea. Perhaps he and Ellie hadn't truly woken up, but was severely injured in the car accident, in a near-death state. The black fog represented the arrival of death. To break the situation, they had to force their way through the black fog. The two of them returned to the edge of the black fog, determined to survive, and Jason led Ellie straight in. Inside, the wind howled, and the sand stung their faces painfully. Just as Ellie was about to give in, a white light suddenly appeared in the distance, and then the storm gradually subsided. An ancient stone door appeared before them, with countless keys scattered on the ground. Jason picked one up and inserted it into the keyhole, seemingly seeing something wriggling inside, but the stone door didn't budge. He wanted to keep trying, but Elle noticed a dry well not far away, surrounded by thick chains. The two were startled when a low growl came from the dry well, and the creature inside pulled on the chains, seemingly ready to climb out at any moment. Realizing the danger, Ellie and Jason quickly fled towards the mist, with the growling getting closer behind them. Fortunately, the creature did not follow them out. After escaping back to the town, Jason rushed into a weapon shop, found a shotgun, and was about to leave when the lights in the house across the street turned on. Opening the door, Jason confirmed that this was indeed his home. Arriving on the second floor, he saw his younger self lying on the table drawing comics, his mother losing her temper in the living room, and his father quietly coming over to slip him a carnival ticket. Jason's gaze fell on the comic book, and the last page depicted a stone door, exactly like the one in the Black Mist. Before the two could investigate further, the Black Mist had already advanced to the edge of the town, and the howling from the dry well sounded again. The two quickly fled into the nearest police station. Just as they hid under a table, the monster actually followed them in. Through a hole in the table, Jason saw a key hanging on the monster's chest and instinctively thought it was the key to opening the stone door. So he bravely stuck out the gun barrel and the bullet pierced through the monster's body, but it could still move. After a few oars, it disappeared without a trace. Jason was so anxious that he scratched his head, convinced that as long as he got the key from the monster and opened the stone door, he could break the predicament surrounded by the Black Mist. Because these were exactly the settings in his comic book. Ellie felt a spark of hope and thought of a bold plan. Jason dismantled a grenade to make a simple bomb, and Ellie brought a large piece of fresh pork from the supermarket, hiding the bomb inside the meat, thus completing a hunting trap. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the monster approached, drawn by the smell of the meat. Jason, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly pulled the fuse, but the expected explosion did not occur. He coughed under his breath and quickly raised his shotgun. As the bullet was fired, a thunderous explosion erupted, engulfing the monster's figure in flames. The two of them quickly ran down to find the key, when suddenly a deafening roar came from around the corner. The monster was still alive. The previous explosion had broken the chains on its body, and it was even faster than before. Ellie and the other person sprinted desperately, but unfortunately, they were eventually caught by the monster. With just one encounter, Jason fell to the ground covered in blood. Seeing Jason on the brink of death, Ellie felt as if she had lost the most precious thing, and an unnameable anger ignited in her heart. The moment the monster lunged, she picked up the fallen table and fiercely pierced the monster's body. When the monster was completely still, Ellie pulled out the key from its chest. As the key was inserted into the stone door, Ellie suddenly awoke from the hospital bed, realizing that the bizarre experiences in the town were likely her subconscious world while she was unconscious. She frantically pulled out the IV and rushed to the next hospital room. However, Jason was not there. But Ellie did not give up and found Jason's home. Opening the door, she met a full-time caregiver who said that Jason was discharged shortly after the car accident, but lost both legs and all memories after the accident. Ellie's heart sank, until the caregiver took out a recent comic created by Jason, which depicted the Black Mist, the monster with a key embedded in its chest, and even the childhood scene they saw at the burger joint. Ellie took the comic to Jason, flipping through it page by page, recounting their life and death experiences in the world of consciousness. Jason's eyes gradually shifted from confusion to clarity, and Ellie in front of him gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. However, the movie ends abruptly here. As for whether Jason actually entered the world of consciousness, or if Ellie had seen a similar comic and thus visualized it in the consciousness world, the movie never provided any hints or explanations. Alright, that's it for today's commentary. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section, and see you next time.